think part of it, the onus is on us as the sender to take ownership, to ask for what we need. Yes. That's what it is. And I think a lot of times we're too busy blaming the other person for not meeting our need when we haven't actually asked for what we need.
Exactly. So good.
Right?
So good. And this goes back to Marshall McLuhan and the communicate your needs and your feelings. So his whole thing, and this is all about non-violent communication, is like never assume anybody else's needs or feelings. You don't know. All you can do is communicate your own needs and your own feelings.
Right.
Hello, this is Rediscovering Connection with me, Shelley, and I'm here for my very first official fireside with my good friend, Erin. So we are here in your beautiful abode, and we were thinking a theme for this fireside. We've been talking about doing a podcast together for ages.
I feel like since our first meeting.
Right. And now we're like, okay, it feels like the right time. And we're thinking we're going to kind of just delve into the topic of friendship fireside, and just, we haven't got an agenda. That's kind of the way I like to roll. And just kind of allow the conversation to go in the direction that it wants to go. So welcome.
Thank you. So excited we're doing this.
Yeah. And we've got some beautiful homemade cookies here. So I'm quite excited about this.
Yeah. So the story with the cookies. I grew up in a home where my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And that was a very conscious decision between my parents. Like, it wasn't just kind of like an assumed thing. My mom is actually a fully trained RN. She has her university degree. But what really felt important to them is that one of them would stay home and be available to us kids. And that looked like volunteering for field trips, or in my case, what it looked like a lot of times was, even if my mom had packed me a lunch, this was back in the days when kids could walk to and from school and like excuse themselves at lunchtime to say, I'm going home for lunch. Back in the day. And so often I would go home for lunch, even when I had a packed lunch, because I just needed that check-in and connection with my mom.
How beautiful to have that available to you.
I said to my mom recently, like, Mom, I just want to say, like, I never accounted for how that must have affected your daily rhythm, that you always made sure you were home at lunchtime for us and available to us if and when. And we didn't necessarily, and it was always an option in the morning. Hey, are you coming home for lunch today, or do you want me to pack you a lunch? Always an option, always open. So my mom loved to bake. My mom taught me to bake. My mom turned 70 at the beginning of September this year. And one of my brothers and his wife had the genius idea that we should put together a cookbook of all, we call her Granny, of all Granny's recipes. It's called Let's Cook Granny. And so us kids got together and like dug through our recipe books and, what's mom's recipe for this? And what's mom's recipe for that? And then for each of the sections, we all did a story of like our memory of like mom and cookies, mom and bread, mom made all our bread after a certain point in our lives. And which I was very ungrateful for. I only wanted the store-bought. Thank you. We don't need any of this like homemade bullshit. Thank you. Anyway, so
these are mommy's recipe.
Well, these are my grandma's. These actually are, although oatmeal chocolate chip are a like favorite and like staple in my mother's home, and we're growing up. Those are not that recipe, but my kids aren't like huge oatmeal chocolate chip kids, which is fine. But after like composing these stories and realizing like just what a special thing it was, where my lunch always included home baking, always, which was partly an affordability thing. We're living on one income. But partly it was just like this is how my mom invested in us. This was part of how she loved us, was cooking for us, baking for us.
And did you get involved?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think like my mom and I are very different people. And my mom really, I was not, when the doctor said it's a girl, immediately my mom's head was filled with certain like, oh, this is going to happen and she's going to be like this and we'll get to do this and da da da. And I was not that person. So there was like a real distance and like personality clash. And when I was little, we had a very difficult relationship. Now we have a beautiful relationship.
But it's taken work.
A lot of work on both our parts.
And that's it. People have got to be ready to put in the work.
And notice the growth in the other person too, right? Like I could stay stuck in my childhood version of my mom and I, and my mom could stay stuck in the childhood version of my mom and I, but she's grown, I've grown. And I mean, I admire so much my mom's ability to be humble when she has gotten difficult feedback and not always given, often not given in a respectful way. And she has taken that and made space for that and grown from it.
And you're such an amazing communicator. Like I really do praise you on this. No, you are a phenomenal communicator. And I mean, I know you educate yourself a lot through the work that you do with children, but that must have really enhanced or enabled that your relationships to grow to a deeper level.
Yeah. I mean, I think communication and being articulate was highly prized and highly valued, and also like explicitly taught in my family. Our dinner table was the debate table. And so, you know, like an issue would come up and the expectation was you were going to take a stance, and your stance might be ridiculous. Okay. Like you might be laughed out of town, but the expectation was you were going to weigh in with your 2 cents. You were going to defend your 2 cents. You were not supposed to get overly emotional. That was unacceptable. But you were definitely supposed to stand and hold your ground. Well, also, you know, like let's make a little bit of space for the other person. That's like if you're going to grade it, that's like A+ energy, A+ communication. You're able to be like, oh, good point, Shelley. Whereas like bare minimum expectation is you're just going to wade into the shit and just like stick in the mud.
Wow. So even if you totally agreed with what they were talking about, did you try and just challenge them anyway to like really get them to dig deeper and defend?
I didn't. My brothers would do that, but my brothers would sometimes do it also as a form of like, I'm just going to piss you off here. I'm going to like poke the devil and see how loud she roars. Yeah. So the cookies are like, here I was writing this story about how my mom would like, you know, make muffins. And the next day I'd like, you know, have a new muffin tucked in my lunch. And I just thought like, even just that language of like, the next day I would find one tucked in my lunch. And somehow like, even though I was the one writing that, I was like, oh God, that's so special. And my kids, like my youngest particularly, loves to bake with me. Like last night at 7:00, I'm busting out the cookies and he's like, Mom, don't start without me. I don't want to miss out. I'm like, well, you better get up there and have a 2-minute shower then and rush back down. He's like, okay. Sure enough, that child was down in like 5 minutes, washed, rinsed, in his pajamas, ready to bake with mom. So cute.
For listeners out there, what age is your son?
He's 7.
7. He's your youngest is 7 and your oldest is
10.5. Yeah. Yeah. And so we made 2 batches of cookies and here we were like, what's next? And do this. And so it's like really like interactive bonding experience. So there's that. So I usually do my baking on Wednesdays. Didn't get there this week, but still did it.
In time for me.
In time for you. And in time for Friday lunches, cookies tucked into lunches. Yeah. So like the bonding over food, right? Like food and drink and eating together. It's such a social experience. It's how we met.
Yes. So we met at the Raw Bay Bakery, which was just around the corner from our first property here on the island. My daughter had just lost her very first tooth and started chatting to your boys.
Yes.
So And people
So
do
cute.
say like it is kind of easier to meet people when you do have children. So I guess that would be a good example of the serendipities, meetings, the conversations that do come when you've got little ones around. And yeah, it's just become a really organic friendship from then on. You were in your other property then?
Yeah, I was in my townhouse.
Yeah.
I don't think we knew we were coming to this house yet. We hadn't got there yet. But yeah, I mean, we're both outgoing people. So it's just like we started chatting as the kids were connecting and, you know, being so sweet together. And then it was kind of like the kids were like, can we have a play together? And you were wondering about home learning.
Yes, and I was so intrigued to hear about, that you are a teacher for an online school.
Yeah.
And that isn't something, I had been very curious in home learning. And when I was at the Eco Village, we had a group of homeschool parents and children with us, and I got to know a few of those quite well. But I'd never heard of that way of teaching before in that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's great because I think one thing that COVID offered to people was insight into alternative ways of working, alternative ways of schooling, alternative ways of making relationships, maintaining relationships, you know, suddenly video conferencing, which I've been doing for years. And I would say to people, oh, I'm going to meet with you on something called Zoom. And they're like, what's that? And I'm like, oh, it's kind of like Skype. Oh, I don't know if I know how to work that. Like, oh, I don't have a working microphone. Like the amount of like tech troubles. Whereas now you say to people, oh yeah, we're going to do an online video call. And they're like, oh, yeah, no problem. I know what you're talking about. Absolutely. Like
everyone's got lights and everyone's got like a supersonic video camera and a nice backdrop.
Totally. Yeah. Like it's completely changed that aspect of it. And I mean, I've been working as a home learning teacher since before my oldest was born. Like I've been doing this now for about 12 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how has this impacted your friendships at work? Because you think of teachers, there's quite a lot of like teachers sitcoms, and it is about this camaraderie in the, in the teachers
totally,
and they're talking about the different kids. So do you have that as part of a remote team of teachers?
Yeah, I can say, so the first school I was at, I was lucky enough to live near some of the people that I was working with. So that was nice in that it was really easy to establish those connections. And we would, oh, let's have a work day together. And we would, gather around the table at my house and they would come and work and we would do that. The school I work with now is really beautiful because, for instance, we get together about twice a year, and we get together for about two days in the fall and 3 days in the spring. And the rest of the time we're all working remotely. We do monthly staff meetings and whatnot. So you'd think it would be really hard to develop those relationships. But even like every time we get together, we make priority for a big group meal. We're doing a catered buffet dinner when I go in 2 weeks. When I went in May, we had almost a whole day at Granville Island.
Oh yeah.
And this was, it's a required expectation that it's not kind of like, oh, I don't need to be there for that. We're not doing anything important. No, this actually, if you're going to be at anything, is like the most important piece. Because, hey, Shelley, when we're working with a student and, this is a more challenging, complex situation, you and I need to have a dialogue and a rapport and an established trust in each other to be able to really support this family. And not only that, there's this big awareness around how lonely it can be to be single solitary in your four walls, looking at your computer screen, and how isolating that can be. So I'm so fortunate to work for an organization that deliberately prioritizes relationship and connection and makes intentional time and opportunities for that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And that just sounds like a really nice hybrid approach. So you know you're going to have those dedicated times. Yeah. I love like gathering, because you always have like really hot tips on podcasts, set on podcasts. Like I love podcasts. Yes. And I love the knowledge sharing that we have when we gather. And I mean, I guess some of that is for work, and some of it is just your personal development as a mom, wanting to be the best mom that you can possibly be. And, you know, your way of being with your children is just so beautiful. Like you see them as their individual beings that they are. And it's beautiful. And I've met a few people here who are definitely that way of thinking. And I've read a few books on it myself. And it is a different way. It isn't the way that a lot of people around me back home are bringing up their children, or the way that I've been exposed to. So it's been a beautiful learning journey, because I wasn't wanting to bring my children up in the traditional way. And that's why I know when I was on mat leave in the UK, I met a group of homeschooling parents then, and I was intrigued about it. And it was more, I think it's more their way of being that I appreciated. It's not that I don't want to have my own career and have my own time and actually have them being socialized in an educational environment. But it wasn't quite the right fit. So I mean, so far I've been super impressed with the education system for elementary here in Canada. They seem to have a lot more, like they call it Pro D days here, which is like teacher training. I guess they seem to have a lot more, and the teachers seem very, very connected with the individual students. Beautiful. And it does seem to be a lot more about feeling, relationships, communication than necessarily the learning at this point. Like my daughter's 7, going on 7.5. She's only just really reading, and not confidently. She can read some words. She's not reading whole books yet. But I've been of the approach that she's learning so many other things right now, and that will come. We will continue to read to her and give her the space to chime in, and then this is naturally gonna grow.
I mean, I think there is a growing awareness that children need to not only see the value, but have some sort of enjoyment. And the enjoyment is going to build the buy-in, and the buy-in is going to build the self-motivation, and the self-motivation, once you've found that, you found everything. But you're not necessarily going to get there if all you do is just put requirements on them and just say you have to. I mean, I'll be honest, there's so the way our curriculum is structured in BC, it was just restructured a few years ago. And now it's structured into like, here's our big ideas, here's our skills, they're called curricular competencies, and then here's our topics, here's our content. And the idea being that you kind of want to look at the overarching big ideas and then say, what skills do we want to use to engage with those big ideas? And what content do we want to use to build those skills? So it's kind of this reverse engineering process, whereas before we weren't in this informational age and this instant informational age where you can just Google it, ask Siri. Whereas now, you know, we need to catch up with the fact that kids don't need to hold all this in their head. They need to know how to find it. They need to know how to evaluate it, because there's way too much out there and it's not all trustworthy. So now we need to look at critical thinking skills. You can use anything to build those. So let's get kids excited. Let's get kids engaged. And to me, I kind of look at it as one step further, where let's look at kids as whole humans. Let's stop thinking that, oh, they're just a kid, they're fine. they'll go along to get along. Well, yeah, they will. And then by the time they're 20 and 30 and 40, and they're doing all their therapy and trying to unlearn everything they learned and all these narratives that they built that, their voice didn't matter and they just needed to obey. And sick days, you need to be sick enough. There's no such thing as a proactive, let's take care of ourselves. And you need to just shove it down and just get through. And you need to turn off and ignore yourself and not follow your body cues. And I think that there is a lot of noise, especially as moms. Mom guilt is so real. But I mean, let's generalize it. Let's just say parent guilt in general is so real. And we are all trying so hard to do our best by our kids. And also, sometimes our kids are so fucking annoying that we can't even stand them. Like, seriously. And you know me, like, I adore my children.
Yes.
I adore them with like my whole heart. They are the most amazing humans on this earth. And sometimes, God damn it, I can't anymore. I just can't. And we need to also like, so what does it look like? What does it look like to hold space for ourselves, to take care of ourselves, to be able to say to our kids, I'm a person here too.
Mm-hmm. And say to our partners as well. Like, I think I've really been learning from some of my co-parenting friends and on the beautiful balance that can be achieved with co-parenting.
It's like my biggest parenting hack is like, especially when your kids are little enough that they don't have a real concept of time, you will have like 90% less meltdowns.
If they just have warnings.
But if you just
up to 10 warnings.
However you can, like however many you can pack in. And your kids too. Like your kids might need less. My kids, especially my older one, needed a lot. Needed a lot of prep, a lot of gentle, like, we're gonna go this way now.
Ooh, it's communication. It's like over communicating.
Oh yeah.
Until they say, Mom, you've already told me that. Like, I already know we're doing that. You don't need to keep telling me. Then it'll be like, okay, then I'll wind them back in. Let's get on to friendship. Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about how, like, making friends can be hard.
Yeah.
Especially making the right friends that you can really be yourself with and who you don't feel judged by. You can just be, you can be you and actually get to know the version of you that you are, that you want to be, that you want to embody more, right? Because the person you are with is like supporting that, embracing that, and like loving that version of you.
Yeah, like finding those people that you feel like after you've hung out with them, you're like, oh, that was so good. I feel energized. And like, you feel like you're becoming more yourself when you spend time with them, right? Where it's like, you don't feel like you are needing to go along to get along and fawn. I think we do fawning way more than we realize. Way more than we realize. Not only is it hard to recognize when someone else is doing it, I think it's hard to recognize when we ourselves are doing it. We don't often recognize it until it's in reflection. But life is so busy. So many of us don't either have time or create time. We're so busy filling our time or dissociating and disconnecting and that we're not actually reflecting.
Yes. And then if we have the alone time, then either you're catching up on whatever TV show you wanted to watch that you haven't had a chance to for the last weeks.
Yes, and binging 8 episodes. Thank you.
Or checking your social media channels or responding to emails or not sitting down in intention to reflect on the week that was.
At the beach, looking out at the water, losing track of time. Like 14-year-old me was so wise without knowing it. To just like make time and space I would do something called free writing, where I would just write literally whatever would come up. And I remember being faced with some harder decisions. and like just feeling so wrestly around them. Like, I don't know what to do. And so I'd be like, okay, I'm just going to write it out. And the more I wrote and the more I wrote and read back and wrote and wrote and wrote and cried, like, you need to ugly cry. The more it just became clear to me. You keep writing down this variations on the same theme, and you're like, damn, that's not what I want to choose, but it's what I am choosing. Like, you know, oftentimes what we don't necessarily want to choose is the thing that we need to choose.
And I mean, I have never written so much as what I have since I've been here.
Okay.
Like, oh my goodness.
On spiritual VI.
Prolific. I don't have the capacity to read back all of my writings.
Okay.
But I've been speaking to people about it, and they're like, don't, and then I feel like, oh, I'm not doing myself justice by reading back. And then I've spoken to someone and they're like, don't worry, like, that is your way of processing. Okay. Just allow it. Like, don't feel like you need to read back everything. Like, just, it's a process. Yeah. And it is, I guess, me communicating with myself, because I've worked in communications for the last 20 years. Like, I've always written. I wrote poems and songs as a child. I've always written. But it is, I'm writing a lot.
Like, you're just writing, you're writing in whatever, maybe you're typing. I find it really hard, especially like, because I was saying my tendonitis, physically writing for me, like for long periods, is actually painful for me now. So like, I would probably type, or like, actually probably my form of journaling now is Marco Polo with my cousin and my best friend. That is my journaling. But yeah, like, and I don't go back and rewatch my Marco Polos.
But can you put notes on them so that you tags, you know what you
if I paid the exorbitant membership fee, which I just can't yet. I don't know if you do, but I can't. So
Marco Polo, should we touch on Marco Polo, because this is an interesting topic, because there's not many of my friends who are on Marco Polo.
Okay.
You're one of only 2 people that I speak to regularly. Okay. And then I have another few that are on there, but rarely on there.
Can I just say I love that I'm like limited a dish?
Yeah. I know. And it's nice. And it's not. Okay, so what I like about Marco Polo, and I've just figured this out recently, is that with texting, there's some kind of like need, or you feel like you need to respond immediately. And I think the same with WhatsApp. You feel like you need to respond immediately.
I do not suffer from this.
Email, it doesn't.
Like
email, you don't expect a response anytime soon. It's like, if a response comes, cool. Yeah, but you don't send
it's as good as snail mail. Like,
it is.
Who knows if they even read it? So
yes. But Marco Polo, it's not like you're always ready to do a video message, but it's always lovely to receive it. Okay. And then you'll receive it and then be like, oh, I'll go to Marco. And then I might watch it. I might watch it. I do like it. And then I might watch it and then I'll be like, well, I'm going to respond. But then you get on with your day. And then when the like little call takes you, then I'll be like, oh, I'm going to respond. And then I'll like rewatch. Okay. So I get like a double dose of Erin.
Yeah. Oh, so like, I love that. I love that. Yeah. And so like, for me, it just depends who I'm talking to. So my best friend Christina and I, depending on what's going down in our lives. So like my most recent breakup, leading up to it, after it, like leading up to it, the stuff that was going around where I was like, ooh, I need to have a conversation with this person. And I was like really nervous for this conversation. And then he hit me out of left field. And I was like, I'm sorry. Excuse you, what? And then we had a follow-up conversation. So leading up to that follow-up conversation, I was like, really needing to process. Christina, bless her, we sat in front of our computers for the day with our phones propped up beside us, and we Marco'd back and forth constantly the whole day. Like, we may as well have been on FaceTime. But what I love about Marco is it creates this intentional listening space. Yes. You can't interrupt the person. So then what I do is I start taking notes. and like she takes notes, or like my cousin will take notes and I'll take notes from my cousin, where I'm like, ooh, I need to respond to that about this thing between her and her partner. And I want to respond to this about her and her kids. And she asked me this question, so I need to make sure I respond to that. It's like this really intentional of communication. Because Christina and I like will leave each other 15 messages. She'll leave me 15, I'll leave her 15, then she'll leave me 5 and I'll leave her 10. And like we are heavy Marco users.
And this is, I mean, the work that I do with clients is really helping them to embed these relationships into their lives. And like, what a beautiful case study I have with my friend who's doing this so effectively.
I like this. Yeah.
You know, you are doing this beautifully. And I know I put a press release together a couple of months ago, and I'm like, I'm basically thinking that my program could mean like, it could be a disruptor in that people won't necessarily need coaches or some therapists. Like, not, you know, you have specialists of both,
right?
Who can definitely take you to a place that your close inner circle cannot. But really, if we all get this right, and we build our circles with intention, and we give time and space to a small number of people and get that reciprocated, like, that's all we need to survive and thrive.
Well, because this is what keeps coming up for me as I listen to you, is this theme of like, you write it out, but you don't necessarily listen to it. You say it on Marco, but you don't listen back to it. My kids will throw something out there that to the outside listener might sound quite concerning in terms of like what it is they're saying or who they're saying it about. And it sounds like a big statement. And I learned from an early stage with both of them that it's not that they don't mean what they're saying, but it's really important for all of us to have a space where we can just get it out of our body. We can just throw it out there into the universe. So like when my kids were little and, you know, still adjusting to certain things, and they would say things that they were upset about that might have happened at the other home, and they would just need to vent about it. And so I would, okay, that's hard, and I'm sorry that happened. And you know, and I need you to talk to him about such and such. And I'd say, okay. And then I would just leave it, and I would give it at least 24 hours. And then I would come back to them and I would say, so you shared this with me yesterday. Do you still need me to follow up about that? And 9 times out of 10, the answer was, no, I'm good now.
Processed it.
They just need to get it out. They just need a space to like throw it at the wall. And like, so we as adults, we need those friends who we can just throw it out, no matter how outrageous, no matter how much we need to like spew vitriol at the person who wronged us. And like, we're not going to spew it at them, but I need to spew it somewhere. And I need someone to hold that for me. And having friends who can hold those spaces, or who can hold like, Jesus, I don't know if I should still be in my relationship, or, you know, whatever it is, like we can throw these big things out there, and to have someone just hold it for us, not judge it, not try to solve it, not trying to assign meaning to it, nothing, but just go, and get curious about it.
And this is like, when I did my coaching program, and I was basically learning how to coach, and there's you know, it's quite simple once you learn the tactics. It's like, if everyone was just taught the simple practices of coaching, which will include below this video, if everyone was just taught to coach, and that was part of the friendship agreement with your close friends, like, don't feel like you have to give a solution. Know that the individual has to have agency over the decisions that they make. They just need to be able to talk and be
sometimes
heard.
heard it, and sometimes just heard it said back to them, like, oh, that's so interesting. Mirroring. I hear you saying, and you're like, oh shit, I didn't say that. Or like, no. Or like, oh damn, I said that. And then like you hear yourself, like you read your journal back, you listen to your Marco back, your friend repeats back to you, and you're like, oh. And either you might, kind of like turn it around and look at it a different way and go like, no, I'm not ready to see it that way. And maybe you need to hear it back like 5 different times. You've said it 5 times, you need to hear it back 5 times. And you're like, fuck, I keep saying that. What does that mean? Or you need to like hear yourself and know the message that you're sending out. And you're like, that's not actually what I'm meaning to say. So I need to change how I'm communicating my message. Like, it's so valuable, right?
So good.
Yeah. Yeah. The reflective listening. I think even like, as you learn to do it for other people, you learn to hear yourself.
Something that I'm also noticing of myself, I went to the most amazing workshop last week with a guy called Mead Simon. Okay. Which is quite a name.
I feel like it should be Simon Mead. Like,
I know, right?
He's done a funky thing. He's reversed his name.
Maybe he has.
I love
he's it. What's he called? So he makes this like amazing fashion pieces. Like he's got some in galleries around the world, but it's all what do they call it? Can't remember the name. He does a lot with jewelry as well, and I can't remember the name of it, but I'm going to remember, and I'm going to include a link to him because he's very, very cool. Okay. Anyway, so he did this workshop on creativity, unleashing your creativity. Yeah. And his thought is that we are all made to be creative beings. We are made by a creator. We are made to be creative beings and to have creative expression. Yeah. And he talks about the difference between an amateur and a professional. Okay. And the, like in French, like amateur, it literally means for the love.
Oh, it's not a proficiency thing.
You're just doing it for the love of the
So you could be like amazing at it,
but you're doing it for the love. Like you don't care about the money. The professional, really, that just means you're getting paid for whatever it is.
Oh, I love that.
So doing it for the love, and it kind of releases the pressure of it being good. Yeah. And something he said, which really struck me, was that all of the greats copied until they found their style. Yeah. That you copy other people that you admire. Another French word, I think. Amour, maybe that's love. Until you find your style. So we were talking about creativity and like all the different ways that we can be creative. And it's interesting that we're talking about like, I'm just writing. It's like, well, what about if I started painting instead? But that painting, I was saying in my mind, I was using that as time for working through whatever the thoughts are that normally I'm writing down and the words are not read anyway. Yeah. Yeah. But could I look back at that picture that I created? I'm not an artist. I'm not very good. And know what I was thinking, because that's what they always say when you dissect art. They're like, this is what they were going through.
Oh God, I hate that shit. No, I feel like that is so presumptive. I reject it. There is what you can get out of that piece of art. There is what is going on for you, but that's like looking at someone else and pretending like you know what they're thinking. Absolutely not.
I did English literature. Literature as an A level, and I think I kind of laughed along with that because we would dissect it, and I would think at the time they were probably just writing. I'm going to tell you
a wonderful story. So when I was in my first year at college, I got super sick right before Christmas, and I wrote an exam, like just so sick. And it wasn't until like I'd been at my parents' for quite a few days and I was starting to get better, and I'm thinking back on this exam and I remembered what I'd written on this college level exam, and it was something to the effect that like some very famous poet was basically blowing smoke up his ass. I literally put the words on my college exam. He was basically blowing smoke up his ass, and I was like, oh I did not do well on. I don't even know what my mark was yet, but I guarantee I did not do well on that one. What college professor is going to be impressed at a student who has that perspective?
I imagine if you at least remembered the name of whoever it was you were talking about, you would have got a point. Because I think that has been been the thing, isn't it? You get points for memory.
Well, and that comes back to what I was saying earlier about schooling and reverse engineering, and this recognition that that's the wrong place to be putting our emphasis
on memory.
And
when we don't even need to use our memory because we've all got
it's a false and it's a false economy too, right? It's a false economy because it's pretending that people who have a good memory are the smartest. And that is absolutely false, because we know that, you know, some of the most brilliant minds are people with dyslexia. One of the markers of dyslexia is challenges with working memory. Working memory is your ability to hold and work with new information. So many times I will have parents come to me and say, I don't understand. I'm so frustrated. I feel like I've literally had some parents who are like, I feel like my child is being difficult. This makes no sense. One day they've got it. We've gone over and over and over it. And then we come back the next day and they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, let's just reframe this. Here's what I hear is going on for your child. And what's going on for your child is it's as though their brain is writing in disappearing ink. This is nothing intentional they're doing. This is not because they are not focusing. This is nothing that they have decided to do or not do. This is the way their brain functions. And their brain needs way more repetition than you have patience for, than you think is reasonable, than they want to put in the effort for. But this is what their brain needs. And so it's a completely false economy to think just because you can remember, you're smarter than the person who can't remember, because the person who can't is going to come up with a million adaptive strategies to help themselves remember. They are some of the most creative problem solvers and thinkers on this planet. They are some of the most brilliant business people on this planet are dyslexic minds.
Wow.
It's very cool. And so this idea that, like, just because you were able to remember and I couldn't means that you are better at something.
And I know we've spoken before about the 10,000 hours thing. And to gain mastery in a topic, you need about 10,000 hours, and then you can talk about it fluently, right? Yeah. You don't need to be looking back at your books,
right?
And I know when I'd done a course through UC Berkeley on the science of happiness and the science of happiness at work, and I'd spent about a year and a half studying and getting the qualification, and just thought, yeah, I'm going to be teaching the science of happiness. It's so cool. And in reality, it's like, well, yeah, I could have created a program and started regurgitating everything that I'd learned in that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't my knowing.
Right.
I didn't know it yet. Like I'd learned it and I'd ticked the boxes and I'd completed it. But I hadn't embedded the learning. And this is me as an adult brain knowing that unless I was looking at it, unless I'd have those nudges to be able to take myself through the delivery, I'm just delivering someone else's content effectively. It's not my own work,
it's just memorization.
And these kids, when they've got so many different subjects to learn and different elements on all of these subjects all the time, it's like, how are they expected to retain all of this knowledge?
Right.
In fact, the expectation seems unreasonable, really.
Yeah. And I think that's where kids these days are at an advantage, because there is starting to be this recognition that, yes, it's important to know how to spell. Also, what do you do as an adult? You turn on Grammarly, you run through your spell check. You don't have to run through spell check. That's not even a thing anymore. You don't have to run through spell check. Spell check is automatic because your word is underlined in red, and then you click on it and your thing tells you how to do it. So like, it's not even that like extra step of like, oh shoot, I forgot to run spell check.
But we don't want to dumb us. We don't want to dumb us down as a nation or a civilization.
No. That's not a thing. That's not a thing. Okay, so my oldest, that kid is working so hard at his spelling this year. And before I had met with his teacher had given him a comment when he got a mark that was lower than expected on his spelling test, saying, "Oh, buddy, I think you got to study a little bit more." And my son was like, and he's not one to speak up for himself in the moment, but that comment was so like, oh, to him, because what he had done and what the teacher didn't know is he has developed this habit for himself. This kid is in grade 5. He decided on his own that he is going to set his alarm for 6 a.m. on Friday mornings. After he has done Wednesday spelling practice, Thursday spelling practice, he sets his alarm for 6 a.m. on Friday morning so that he can get up early enough to have his shower, run through his words at least 3 times while he eats breakfast, gets ready for school, and then goes out the door.
Oh my goodness.
That's all of his
He's
own.
your son.
Oh, like, well, I mean, I'll give his father a little credit there too. That's definitely a move his father would pull as well. And so like for my son, he was like, oh, you don't understand. I did, but he'd forgotten his spelling work at home. So he couldn't also like verify that, like, no, I did do all the activities. Well, my son has a learning disability in written expression and spelling. Spelling is always going to come harder to that brain, no matter how hard he works at it. And what I'm working on developing with him is like, listen, buddy, a spelling test is only one way of checking in on what words you already know and what words you need to look up. Guess what I do when I don't know a word? I look it up. Who cares? What he now wants to do is he wants to take the spelling test with everybody else, because that's what everyone's doing and he doesn't want to be othered. He wants to take it on Friday. Then he wants to continue studying for Saturday and possibly Sunday, retake the test on Sunday, and then also hand that in to his teacher and see if his mark improves.
And this is bringing something up. So we went on the global Joe Dispenza Walk for the World together nearly 2 weeks ago now.
I know.
And we had just such a beautiful, rich conversation afterwards when we were walking along with that incredible 17-year-old.
Oh my God,
Brayden.
that human. Yeah. That human. Love that
really
human.
Incredible guy. We're gonna send him a link. And you said something really incredible about this idea of inclusivity. And it was a perspective that I had not heard before.
Okay.
So what did you say? So what I can recall you saying, and you can correct me and say what your actual view is, was about, and maybe it was him as well, saying about rather than giving people that have learning difficulties, giving them the extra time in exams, why not let everybody know that this extra time is available if you need it?
Right.
So people don't need to be running off for these diagnoses to then be labeling themselves something so that they can get this extra attention, but just allowing everybody to have that.
Yeah.
And then those that complete it, if they want to leave, they're in their power to leave. Totally. And those that need the time, have the time and give what you need to complete the exam.
Yeah. I mean, like, I hope that within both of my sons' educational careers, that time tests become a thing of the past. I totally understand that, like, especially within the structure of a classroom, that there is a schedule and, you know, time is finite and the clock is a real thing. At the same time, time tests to a certain degree are bullshit, because all our brains work differently. And just because I can't come up with the knowledge as fast as you can doesn't mean I don't know it. It doesn't mean that I won't be able to recall it. And again, like, even going back to the piece about consent and like knowing when to call it quits. Like, here's a basic life skill: knowing when to say, I'm done, I've given this my best. Right? So it's not like an infinite thing. And what child is going to sit there for infinite time? If they do, we have another conversation to be had. We have another skill to explore. I will say that my oldest son might be one of those, although, you know, everyone's going to get bored at some time. Everyone is going to meet their limit. So I don't think we need to worry that just because we don't have a time test, that kids aren't going to know when to call it quits. If we're raising kids to be in touch with their bodies, if we're raising kids not to squash it down, if we're raising kids to be able to say no, to understand that if they say no, they will be met with, okay. Or at the very least, tell me more. At the very least, be met with curiosity. Mm-hmm. Kids will say no when they need to say no. And we should be teaching kids how to say no when they need to say no, and then accepting their no. That is not easy. I will tell you from experience, giving my kids as much agency as I do. I have this conversation with my parents. No, the way I parent is not easy. It is not easy. There are times where I'm just like, oh man. And there are times too where I'm like, God damn it, I'm your parent. You will just fucking listen to me. Like, I don't say it in those words, but in my head. Right? And it just, yeah, like there are times where my ego is way in the way of what is happening. But that's my ego. That's like my thing of like, it should be this way. Okay, well, like, stop shoulding on me. Like, just stop it. Like, it's all over the place. And so, like, I really think, sorry.
You're That's got to be on a t-shirt. Stop shooting on me.
I'm shooting t-shirts. We can't. Yes. This part has to be cut. This part has to be cut. We're taking a pause. We're taking a pause, and then I'm going to the bathroom. But I have so many t-shirts. Not this vulva. That's a t-shirt. That okay. I've worked it out, Shelley.
I think they're not. Stop shitting on me.
Oh, I have an umbrella. The umbrella starts. Yeah.
Okay, but I'm just. I love this so much.
I made you choke. I'm so sorry.
I love this so much. The shitting on me. We should all the time on ourselves and other people. Okay. And I know in the past I've definitely seen this, and it's like change the should to a could. I could do this.
Sure.
And okay, so a big one that's coming up for me is birthdays.
Okay.
And there are so many people in our worlds who all have birthdays.
Right.
And I love birthdays. I love being with people. I love being in celebration. Yeah. I love the feeling of celebrating someone when I'm there. But I feel like there's a lot of societal pressure on what we should be doing.
Yes.
And a lot of guilt when we don't have the capacity to.
And I think that is a lovely connection point and tie-in to what you're saying around, let's not feel like we should have X number of connections and people. Let's not feel like we should be able to be intimate with 50 people and then we feel guilty. Let's actually reframe and ask ourselves, how many feels good for you? Because maybe for you, you feel good with more people than I do. I have realized for myself, I mean, dark times in my teens, dark times when I felt like I should have been out doing different things, or I should have gotten that invite, but that wasn't really the crowd that I wanted to run with, but I should have, etc. Twisty spaces. And the older I get, the more I'm like, you know what? I am so fulfilled by these lovely people that I do have in my life. And I realize that I don't actually have the capacity. Me personally, I realize I don't have the capacity for lots of intimate connections. I am not somebody, I dated this one guy who he seemed to be like the 50 person. Also, he seemed kind of exhausted by it. He was shooting a lot on himself. And that was a place that he was exploring. But you know, for me, I kind of looked at it and I thought, gosh, I don't even know where I'm going to fit within that, because
in his spheres.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like, and I remember asking very early on, saying like, do you even have room for this?
This is the guy that lost his brother. Right.
Yeah. And not to shit on him, not to say that what he had was wrong, not to say that, you know, there was anything wrong with what he was doing. If it was working for him, that's beautiful. And I celebrate that for you. I'm just not sure that I am that social. I'm a very social person, but I'm a very social person with a select few people. I love meeting new people. Also, I think I have a hard time holding a lot of people at once. I like a few people deep.
Yes.
That's me. And that's not everybody, and that's okay. So,
but I think you come up with a really valid point, and this is part of the conversation that I had with Robin Dunbar. It's like, yes, these people can think that they've got 50 good close friends. Yes. The reality is that unless there is a tier in your social system, which normally naturally occurs, we don't normally have to think about it.
Yeah.
Unless there is that tier, then all 50 of them are only getting a very small chunk of you.
Absolutely.
And it's like, if you want to go deep, then you need to have less in those inner circles.
You need to free up some energy. And I think what happens is it takes big life events, often tragic, hard shit happens, for us to reevaluate what we have. Where what we had, it felt like it was working, everything was grooving, it was chiming. The shit hits the fan, and suddenly we realize and we go inward, and a lot of stuff gets burned up in the process. Not because we didn't enjoy it, not because it wasn't wonderful, not because it's a commentary on that person or, you know, anything like that. It's just, we don't have the capacity. And in order to survive, we have to distill. And sometimes, you know, I don't even know that we're totally aware of what's going to be left over. It's not even necessarily a completely intentional process of like, I'm cutting you and I'm keeping you.
No, it's like organic.
It's an organic distillation process, and what is left at the end.
What I found very much related to that was over the pandemic, and I'd been living in Wales for probably 6 years before it began, maybe even longer. And I got some nice friends there. But then when we were locked down, I was more speaking to my old friends that I was used to speaking to on the phone than the ones that were near me, who were relatively new friends. Right. Because proximity didn't matter. And it's like, well, they were my kind of deeper, longer term friends. Whereas the ones there were they're right in front of your face. They're in front of my face, but they're almost like, it sounds kind of cruel, but it's kind of transitional friends at the time. It's like, it's like you don't know yet that you're going to go the distance. Some of them I've known for a year. So, you know.
Do you think also, though, it could come down to like familiarity of ways of relating? So as in, like, you already had this system and familiarity of relating across distance.
Yes.
That was already established. You didn't have to build that.
I didn't have a telephone relationship with these people there.
And unless they were somebody that you'd really like, your energy had just really aligned with, and you're like, oh, I am craving Shelley's energy right now, I'm gonna ring her on the phone. Then you know, like, then yeah, that does kind of fall off. And it
Okay, so let's just go back to the Marco, because the other person that I Marco very regularly is a friend that has ADHD, and she's basically, she hates texting, and she basically said that Marco Polo has really helped her to realize who her friends are.
Oh, wow.
Because it's really the only channel that she's comfortable with. And she's the same, like she doesn't need herself to be like fully made up to go on Marco Polo all times a day. And the people that have that relationship with her, she's like, you're my people, because you allow me to be seen, to be heard, you know, and to come where I'm at, to come where I'm at. So she's a huge champion for Marco Polo. So I'm intrigued if it is potentially a thing for people with ADHD. It's it's a channel that you can work with. More
See, but again,
effectively.
like going back to the stop shitting on me, I do not immediately reply to text messages. You don't immediately reply to text messages.
No.
I know, right? And like, I don't know how that feels for you, but I generally don't open the text message unless I know I'm able to reply to it right away. Because if I've opened it, then I don't have that blue dot cueing me that there's something there for me to take care of. It's the same with my emails. In fact, I will often, especially at work, I will open an email, I will read the email, and then I will mark the email as unread so that I know to come back to the email
notification for that.
Yeah, and Google Nudges, thank God for Google Nudges, where it sends it back to your inbox being like, oh, you never heard back from this person, or you never responded to this person. It's been X amount of days.
3 days.
Yeah, 3, sometimes more. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. So I think this is a really good exercise in communication with friends. Okay. So the expectation of text messaging. So I said a little bit earlier that I feel like text messages, people expect an instant response.
Yeah.
And like you just flagged, I'm not an instant responder. Hands up, I'm not.
Yeah.
And I don't expect that in response neither.
Right.
There's something that's come up recently, excuse me, with another friend is, should we start flagging on messages? So if it is a text message or is it a WhatsApp message, like just having an inside code with friends, basically that like it's just a
like
conversation.
I need a response right now.
Or if there is something that is more like, I'm actually dealing with some shit right now and I could really use a friend. Like what could be a code within that to say, normally I won't put anything, but if it's something that I'd actually really love you to read, because if you're like, I know,
I'll always read the little prelim blurb. Like I have that type of notification.
Right.
So
what
and
code
usually for me, like I would say, hey Shelley, no rush. And then get into my message.
Okay, so let's co-create a code for ourselves right here.
Or if it's like wondering your thoughts, like I feel like there's certain key phrases we already have that,
but for other people that wouldn't have, because I know we're quite good at communication between ourselves, but a lot of people that listen to this might not be this honed in on comms. And like no disrespect to anyone, like I've been working in comms for 20 years. You have to be a very good communicator for your work, but for other people it's like
reading between the lines.
Think about coding your communication with friends, because if you are there needing an instant reply from friends and then your friend doesn't reply to you, that's not to say they don't absolutely love you and respect you. It's that they don't work on this immediate response requirement. However, if you do phrase it in a way so that you do come up, say, could really like do with a quick response, or a code that you come up between yourselves to say, this is an amber. right? So
Red alert, 911.
right, and that's
I mean,
it.
I put it in the subject line at work sometimes. Like if I really need you to look, I'll say like response needed, or I'll say urgent, or please read, or
right.
like, and I think part of it, the onus is on us as the sender,
Yes,
to take ownership, to ask for what we need.
yes,
That's what it is. And I think a lot of times we're too busy blaming the other person for not meeting our need when we haven't actually asked for what we need.
exactly. So good.
Right?
So good. And this goes back to Marshall McLuhan and the communicate your needs and your feelings. So his whole thing, and this is all about non-violent communication, is like never assume anybody else's needs or feelings. You don't know. All you can do is communicate your own needs and your own feelings.
Right. And also in that, see, here's the thing. I think we spend a lot of energy trying to guess, like, ooh, is she mad at me? Ooh, is my partner, did he look at me a certain way? Like, I know for myself in relationships, because of my past trauma and history, I am always waiting for the other shoe to drop. So my most recent relationship, I would say to my partner, like, here's what I'm working through in my head. And I just want to be really clear. I know this is in my head. And it's like I have two voices in my head, and one is trying to stir shit up. And the other one is like, Erin, we are okay here. There was no look. And even if there was a look, it does not mean what you think it was. Just breathe. We can trust this person. Right. And I think, like, first of all, having that forward facing conversation with our partner lets them know that if I'm acting off or weird, my partner knows that my brain is being really active and twisty right now and really noisy for me. And my partner can choose to show up in that space with more compassion, more understanding, more grace. And that makes me feel more safe. And that makes me feel more valued. And that deepens our connection. My partner can also choose to be like, you are fucking batshit crazy, and we're good here. Like, peace out. And that also gives me information, because that's not a person I want to be with, right? Like, that sucks. That feels awful for me, but it's also good information. So, like, I don't think either outcome is good or bad. It's information. So we need to take ownership, like you say, to ask for what we need in any sort of relationship, romantic, work, partnership, like, whatever it might be. And then we need to just receive how the person shows up as information. Is this a person I feel safe with? Is this a person that I can continue being vulnerable with? Is this a person who deepens our connection or who distances from me? And also that when the person hasn't communicated a problem, it's not on us to assume there is one. Maybe there is. My last breakup hit me out of left field. Nothing of a problematic nature had been communicated. The total opposite had been communicated. So I can sit here and I can guess, when did the problems happen? What were they? Or I can just say, you know what? This felt like a really wonderful and safe relationship where I felt really seen. And although I don't understand what happened, it's not my responsibility to figure it out, because I wasn't given that information. I was not invited in to that space. And it doesn't matter why. I personally truly feel like it has nothing to do with something I did wrong or something I didn't do. That it has nothing to do with me. It is work that other person has said they need and want to do.
Brené Brown talks to this in her book Dare to Lead. So she says that when there's missing information, we make up stories. And this is just something our brain naturally does to fill in the gaps that are not provided to us. We make up stories. But because she's identified this, she uses this with her teammates, with her husband, and she says, this is the story that my brain is making up right now. So, like,
exactly.
almost distance yourself from
Totally.
what is occurring in here.
You're recognizing I might be wrong here.
This is the story that my brain's waking, and then they'll go, oh no, that's nowhere near the truth. This is what's happening.
And then you have to be able to let your narrative go. Right. And that's the other half of it, right? Like when I'm saying to my partner, like, it's like I feel like two voices are happening here. And I really want to be clear that this is happening in my head. This is not you doing something wrong. Like, I just want you to know, like, my brain is being twisty right now.
Yes.
You know, and I feel like that's an important distinction. And it's important ownership for me as the person who's making shit up to be like, my brain is making shit up right now.
Right.
And I want you to know you haven't done anything wrong here, but also my brain is being really noisy right now. Right? Like that's important communication. And it's important to say, like, here's what I'm making up right now. Here's what happens when X happens. My brain automatically makes up this story, which is also important communication, because when you behave this way, Shelley, my brain automatically makes up that you're upset with me. When you behave this way, my brain automatically makes up that we're good. Both of those might be false. So you need to hear that, like, ooh, that behavior doesn't land and makes this person feel unsafe. This behavior does make them feel safe, but that's actually not what I intended. I was really fucking pissed off at you and I was just fawning. Right? Like the ownership goes both ways, in that, like, you need to understand how your behavior affects someone else, and someone else needs to understand that the way they're perceiving your behavior might be off. But if we don't share that information with each other,
it's what a beautiful thing to be able to feel safe enough in either your relationship with your partner, with a friend, with a colleague, to own that this is the story that my brain is telling me. So, like, not be the brain, but be the observer.
Not judge it, just hold it.
Be the watcher of what is going on, and be curious enough to go, is there any validity in what my brain is telling me right now? Or could you help to fill in the blank that's going to help us to understand each other better?
And I think, like, I hope, my goal is that at a certain point in self-growth and self-confidence and self-belief, that I don't need to feel safe with you in order to let you know how you affect me. I can love myself enough to know that you don't need me. You don't need to make me feel safe for me to know that it's okay for me to tell you, this is how you affect me. And when you do this, this is how I feel. And this is where my brain goes. I feel like it's an act of self-love, because I'm honoring myself. But at the beginning stages, it's really scary, and you do need to practice it with people you're safe with. That's so, so important.
And then once you do, you're saying, maybe if you date again, that you can feel comfortable. Not if you date again.
Did you just? What? You got. I mean, listen, if it ever happens in God's timing, the next 50 years, one day, when you choose
to go another day, because you've done this work, you're saying that even when you're getting used to being with a new person again, you can feel in your power to kind of have those kind of conversations because you've rehearsed them in previous.
So here's a weird thing that happens for me in romantic partnerships. In the beginning, when the stakes are not high, right? The stakes are just like, this is a cool person, but, like, we'll see where it goes, whatever. It's so easy for me to be myself. And it's so easy for me to call them out on shit and, like, be my loud, in your face, somewhat, like, sometimes antagonistic, sometimes arrogant self. And then as the stakes increase, that gets harder because I get worried that maybe I'm too much. So it takes more and more commitment for me to be true to myself. But when things have ended, I call it like an accountability conversation where I'm like, okay, all right, listen, I'm not here to persuade you of anything. And I'm absolutely not here to change your mind.
But you have an exit interview.
Oh, I fully do. Oh, 1000%.
Yeah.
Like, here's how shit went on my end. And you need to know, how this landed, depending on how the ending went. The last 2 endings, there was absolutely an exit interview.
And you always have them with work. Why not relationships?
I think it's important for somebody to know how they chose to end things, how their actions within the situation affected somebody, because while it may not change anything in the future, I sure hope at the very least it affects them on a level of like, oh, like at the very least, I hope it gives them pause. Best case scenario, I hope they do different next time.
Okay, but what about with friends? So we have an exit interview for romantic partnerships.
I do have an ex best friend. I have, well, 2. I mean more, but like.
Did you have an exit interview for them though?
Hot damn. Okay, the one I tried to. Of
course you did.
And he ghosted.
Of course you did.
And he ghosted.
And he
ghosted more and more and more. Like, and I was like, I don't know what.
But he was a friend, not a romantic partner.
For my side, if I'm honest, like we got along so well. We had so much fun together. Our kids got along. I was like, damn, this would be easy. I tried to be attracted to that person. It just wasn't there for me. That's okay. We had a beautiful friendship. Until we didn't. And I had no idea. All I had was like, I know things seemed off this night, but I don't really know what happened. And this person will not return my calls. Full on.
So like one of your best friends and then Zilcho just ghosted you.
A little less Zilcho and a little more like, yeah, it'd be great. Yeah, we could hang out. And then nothing. And then like, hey, well, how about now? And then nothing. And then like, hey, I leave a message like, hey, I'd really love to chat with you. Just like floating some plans. Give me a call. No return. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I bet this isn't unusual. I imagine this happens.
I kind of hope it is, because it really sucked.
Yeah,
really sucked. And then we had a mutual friend who really wanted us, because the mutual friend understood knew what had happened. Really wanted us to have a like reconciling conversation. I was like, listen, you don't understand. First of all, I don't care what he has to say.
But nothing happened. Nothing happened. Except
he had drastically, and his girlfriend had drastically misinterpreted and misunderstood some comments that I had made that had nothing to do with him, and had misunderstood my intentions towards him and what that conversation was, and assigned. They had made up a story, had not been aware that they had made up a story, had never been willing to own that they made up a story. And I felt like I was back in grade 7. Yeah. So this mutual friend wanted us to have a conversation. And I really loved this mutual friend. And she kept badgering. Till finally I was like, fine. Plan the dinner party. I'll have the conversation. I can tell you, first of all, I'm not that interested in what he has to say. He can explain his side of the story. But I am telling you right now, we will never be friends like we were before, because I do not choose to keep people who treat me this way in my life. I am choosy with the people I am close with. And people who behave that way and people who treat me that way, they don't make the cut. Absolutely not. I don't choose that. So we can have a conversation, but I'm also telling you my boundaries around it.
And this goes into, I guess, the idea of intentional friendship.
100%. I'm very choosy about who my friends are, about who my close circle is. And
because you know that your time is limited and you prefer quality over quantity.
Totally. And when you can't be bothered, when we've had a friendship for years of closeness, and I've babysat your children, and, you know, I have shown up for you in so many different ways.
Was there something, because you said he had a girlfriend, was there something in that shifted?
Yeah, it changed. Which, you know, I mean, I think like things do change when you get a new partnership, and that's,
of course,
you know,
like with my friendship group growing up, it was always very mixed. We had guys and girls in one big friendship group, and then you grow up and everyone finds partners, and then it becomes like the girls get together for hen dos and baby showers. Even the, what do you call them?
I don't know, girls' night.
So hen do is before they get married, but the girls get together.
Stagette.
Oh, stag. So we have stag.
Which actually, I love hen do more, because like ours is a derivative of the stag party. Why do we need to, like, no, thank you. I love hen do. I love that. No, we don't need to be a stagette.
Bring in the hen do in North America, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
Own it. Love it.
Love it. Yeah.
So that was it. So growing up, I feel like once we hit our 30s and I settled down with my partner and have my children, it's like when I catch up with my friends, we'd be catching up with my friends and then my friends' girlfriends and wives.
Right.
And actually the guys that were part of our friendship group, we didn't actually get to see them all that much.
Yeah.
Anymore. So it does change the dynamics. And you know, as we're getting older, I guess moving further into our 40s and going into our 50s, when our kids are going to get older, maybe that dynamics will change again, because we're less having to all catch up in a big group environment. You can be a bit more independent, going more into your interests and passions and things. So I imagine the dynamics will change and evolve.
Yeah.
But it does change. It does change things.
Yeah. So we had the conversation. It did not go well.
You got together with the.
Yes.
Oh.
The dinner party happened. He showed up. He's like ignoring me at first. So finally I'm like, okay, well, I guess we should have a conversation. So we go outside. And I was like,
did you have a chaperone?
No, we did not have
just the two of you.
Yeah, just the two of us. And
brave.
Yeah, and I mean, I started out by being like, hey, like, you know, I'm really sorry if trying to be reconciliatory. And it devolved to the point that, you know, I finally was like, dear God, you need to like, I told him he needed to get over himself and his partner needed to get over herself, and you needed to stop telling yourself stories like you were actually the center of what was happening there, because it actually had nothing to do with you. So like, and yeah, I launched into like when I could see that this was going nowhere, and when the condescension was starting to come my way, I was like, no, fuck this shit. Absolutely not. Lived with that for a long time. Absolutely not putting up with this. So I told him he needed to get over himself, and never ever had I had feelings for him, been attracted to him. Like, I'm so sorry to tell you, but that
so
just wasn't on my end.
This was the story that he was making up.
that his girlfriend had very much made up and fed to him and made, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That you wanted him and that was impacting their relationship?
She basically told him she wasn't comfortable with him spending time with me until he had a conversation with me, which he was unwilling to do. Therefore, he didn't spend time with me.
Oh, well, that's rubbish.
Lame. And I'm sorry, if I'm not worth a conversation to you, then we're absolutely not worth a friendship.
Oh, what a shame.
But then, mutual friend who I loved very much, we also parted ways. Ghosted.
Again. Wow. The one that had actually got you back together at that dinner party.
Who had insisted, that we have the conversation. Eventually, there was some stuff that went down around like a planned event that she explicitly told me that she didn't want me to come to, which was very hurtful. And on the day that happened, we talked like every day, multiple times a day. And on the day that happened, she had left me a message or called me, and I was kind of like, no, I don't want to talk to you on the day that like this event had happened and hear about how wonderful it was, this event that you told me like I wasn't welcome at. Like, and the reasons had nothing to do with me and her. It just had to do with like, I don't feel like I can navigate this other piece around children that might come up. And and so I didn't answer the phone. I listened to her message, and then by the next night I was like, oh, I should call her back. So I called her back, said like, hey, just checking in, give me a call back. And I never heard from her again.
Wow. And Victoria is like, this is the most beautiful city to live in. But in all honesty, Erin, this is not the first time I've heard that kind of story.
In Victoria. Oh, wow.
And I've heard like from another friend who has been living here on and off since her 20s, and she's now in her 50s. And she'd like have a group of friends, and then she'd go off traveling for a few months, and she'd come back and she'd be like, literally, it's like they just all disappeared. It's like, where'd they go?
Oh yeah. And I mean, this was 2020 too. So like, I literally, my friendship circle had dissolved, and I was starting over in a time when like meeting people was extremely hard to do. So I made friends with the hot guy on the top floor of my condo building. Yeah.
How did that go?
Listen, this guy had a lot of requirements for partners, and I invited myself over one night. I did. He was also much younger than me, but he was hot and he was available, and like, why not? He just recently like split with his girlfriend. Listen, single Erin does a lot of things. Okay, all options are on the table.
I love single Erin.
Erin too. She has a lot of fucking fun.
Whenever I call up single Erin, I'm like, hey, do you want to do this? And she's like, am I single? Yes.
100,000%. Yeah. Really delicious human being. Like,
delicious human being. As are you, Erin Miller. And it's been my pleasure to spend our fireside together. And it's just going into winter, so I look forward to many more of these, my lady.
Let's make this a thing, this fireside.
It's a thing. I hope our conversation has been enriching. It's been enriching to me.
I've loved it. Thank you. Love you.
Love you.
Mwah.